Hi, and welcome to Tuesday morning. We're glad you're joining us here today for 9 at 9. And yes, I have just taken off my mask. We are required in our building that if you're not in your office or not social distancing, that you have to wear your mask. So I just wore mine over here to do this taping. And so those of you who are pro-mask, you can say, yay, Mike has a mask. For those of you who are against masks, you can say, hey, I'm glad Mike took his mask off. So, hey, I'm making everybody happy today. Paul in 2 Timothy, we think it's his last letter. He is saying some things to Timothy that he hopes Timothy will get before Timothy returns to Rome. And Paul is kind of hoping that that Timothy returns to Rome before time runs out for Paul. Paul can see the handwriting on the wall. It is Nero's handwriting, and the handwriting means that Paul will one day soon be executed. He is, and we have the stories of that from the early church. He says to Timothy, listen, here's what I want you to do. The story that you have heard from me, that you have seen validated by many people, including your own grandmother and mother, the people that you trust in your life who have shown to you by the way that they live that the gospel that I have told you is true. I want you to invest that same gospel into the lives of faithful men and women who will then invest it into the lives of others. That's what 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 2 says. What you've heard from me, invest into the others who will then invest it into other people. So the first thing we want you to know is we want you to know the big God story that's going on. We want you to understand this great arc of salvation history that goes across time and space, that begins with creation itself, that will end with the consummation of God's promises and the completion of his work in the return of Jesus Christ, how all of that works through the history of Israel, through the history of the church, and now in his second coming. We want you to understand all of that. Yes, I hope you do dig in every verse of every passage deeply. I want you to spend time with every verb and every noun, but sometimes you need to step back and read big chunks of Scripture. You need to read big chunks like entire books. You can read the book of Genesis in one evening. You can read most of the Gospels in one evening. Read big chunks of Scripture so you can see how God moves. You can see how he works with things that went the way he wanted them to go. You can see how he worked with things that, didn't go the way that he wanted them to go, but he worked with them anyway. So you can see how God has worked, and from that, you'll be able to recognize how God is working. We want you to know the whole God story. When we talk about an evangelistic conversation, when we talk about sharing the gospel, it's more than just telling people the plan of salvation. It's sharing with them this whole world view of God as creator, of God as sustainer of life, of God as the meaning of life. It gives the person you're talking to a chance to grab hold of the only world view that consistently makes sense regardless of what any circumstance you may be in. It's the only worldview that makes life work the way that you want it to work. That's what we're talking about. Part of that is knowing how God has worked throughout history so you can now see how he is working now. The other part of that is we want you to know Jesus' story. There are all kinds of rumors and false teachings about who Jesus was, about what he did, and they're not in the scriptures. They're in other things that we call the Gnostic Gospels or other things. Every year around Easter, you'll see a new push that says, hey, we found the lost Gospels of the Bible. We didn't lose them. The church has always known about these Gnostic Gospels. We threw them away. And if we had known that people were going to be digging in our trash, we would have pushed them further down. We haven't lost anything. We just did not see that they told us the story of Jesus. We saw them for what they were. They're fakes. So we threw them away. But you need to know who Jesus was, where he was born, where he grew up. All of those things are important. You need to know Mary's story and Joseph's story. You need to know the Sermon on the Mount. You need to know what Jesus taught about adultery. You need to know what he taught about sexuality. You need to know what he taught about anger. You need to know what he taught about salvation and what it meant to be one of his followers. You need to know all of that. You need to know God's big story, and in particular, you need to know the story of Jesus. So on this Tuesday, let me give you this challenge for today. Read one of the Gospels. Start with verse 1, chapter 1, and read all the way to the end. Don't take a break. Don't think about any particular passage too long. I want you to get through the entire book from beginning to end. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to get started.